right here in the studio with us to discuss news that shook the nation this week are Femi Lawson and Victor OHAI, like I told you earlier. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. Good to see you.
Yeah, good morning.
Okay, so let's begin with quite a number of issues that, shook the nation, just like we said. Let's begin with that dethronement of the Emir of Kano, Sanusi Lamido Sanusi, on Monday. He was banished and detained and finally freed because he went to court to seek, for his freedom. Let me start with you, Mr. Femi Lawson. What are your thoughts about this dethronement and where the situation is now?
It's long expected. If you have followed the events, of the last few months, especially the row between the governor of Kano State and the post-emir. And one thing that a lot of Nigerians weren't anticipating was the event of the last 48 hours that led to that court, injunction, asking the security agencies to allow him access to, to his family, to grant him freedom, because the tradition and the practice, rather, in the past has been when an emir or a king, traditional ruler is deposed, is banished to a particular part of the country, and yes, you rarely hear anything about them again. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, remember the case of the late Sultan, of Sokoto,
yes,
Sultan Dasuki,
mm-hmm,
was banished, and nobody virtually heard about him until, he died. So I think, in as much as a lot of people have expected, the outcome of the feud between the governor of Kano and the deposed emir, which of course eventually came to being on Monday without the decision of the Kano state government, a lot of people would not have anticipated that under 5 days, the man will, reunite with the society where he came from before going on the throne. I think it is very instructive, and that has opened a new chapter, in our history as a nation. And I think we should be looking forward to where that particular suit will end.
Okay.
Mr. OHAI, do you agree? Do you think that it came as a surprise, the pace?
Absolutely not, and I'll tell you. Okay. Just knowing who Sanusi is, you would realize that he's unputdownable, if I may use that language. There's no way he was going to be caged. There's just no way. And it was good that it happened to him, because certain times you need certain people to go through certain experiences to be able to liberate more people, let me put it that way. And so, as soon as it happened, the first statement that came out from his lawyers was, we're going to challenge it. So, and of course, it was obvious that this was against the Constitution. Your freedom of movement, you cannot curtail with any primitive law or tradition. Tradition, not even law, because there's no law that says anyone can be banished anywhere. And because he's educated, he's enlightened, and he also is someone who is aware of his rights. And he's also an activist, which is why, there was that, I can't say, he was always going to be in trouble,
Yeah, because some would say,
very outspoken.
Like some would say, the crown and activism just
they don't mix. They're like oil and water. They can't mix. So, and you can't shut him down. You can't shut him up. So, and so it was bound to happen, like he rightly said. And even the issue of banishing him, it's like, the movie that you've heard about Atom Ant, it's like, you can't contain it. You can't contain him. So that happened. It was bound to happen. And, I'm not surprised at all. And fortunately, this has opened a new chapter for the traditional institution, especially in the northern part of Nigeria that is really conservative. That Suki couldn't challenge it at the time, probably because it was a military, but Jokolo did challenge his own. And
but even that did not really go.
No, I think that went through.
Do you think that anybody has challenged it to the extent that Sanusi Lamido Sanusi has?
No, but Sanusi wrote on that, and it was obvious. This is full democracy.
The court ruling in Jokolo, at the Kebbi State government, and that was what the lawyers premised.
That was a precedent judgment that they wrote upon. In this case, Jokolo, like I said, some people are conservative, and so they will just naturally. Sanusi is.
But Sanusi did not go to court, questioning his dethronement.
No.
He did not. He said he's ready to move on. But what he went to court for was
banishment
his
to Nasarawa State and the restriction of his
movement.
No, it's easy to see why. Because you see, going in, he wanted to fulfill a childhood dream of sitting in his grandfather's, throne. Sitting on the
Yes,
throne.
absolutely.
So having achieved that, it was demystified. And he certainly saw that he was now, although yes, people respect you and all that, but he certainly saw that he was at the mercy of a local government chairman, not even the government.
Not even the government.
You know what I mean?
But do you not think that he went into that role with the want to actually change things from the grassroots upwards?
Well, he suddenly realized that whereas he had an office, he didn't have the power to do any of that. And so you would naturally feel frustrated, even if he never expressed it. But I saw the.
He expressed it. He expressed it.
So, Femi, you think Nigeria is actually the better for it?
I was about to answer myself. Sorry.
We have 2 families on set today.
Come again, please.
Yes, that Nigeria is the better for it because even the man in question, the former emir, has said, look, I've had 6 years of being emir. Yeah. That's good enough for me. I'm moving on from
I love that spirit, and I think a lot of people will learn 1 or 2 lessons from this. But fundamentally, what more lesson have we learned as a people is the need for us to continually respect our law and the need to ensure that our constitution towers above every. Today, one of the major problems we have in this country today is the adherence to the rule of law. And what Sanusi has done, has opened the eyes of more Nigerians to the need for us to continuously engage our law, and continuously enforce the dictates of our constitution above, some funny declarations, or tendencies of people in position to make proclamations that are not contained in the Constitution or that violates the provisions of the Constitution. So I think this has opened the need, not only for the traditional institution to take advantage of, but even the average Nigerians who on a daily basis, are subjected to right violations and some other, the tendencies of people in position who just wake up, make pronouncements, make decrees. Some people today, employers just wake up and send people without recourse to due process. In government today, a governor wakes up and makes declarations, not minding what is stated, in the laws of the state. So these are issues that this kind of decision has opened our eyes to as Nigerians.
All right, like we said, there's quite a number of things that happened in the course of the week. Let's talk about that federal government's approval of community policing.
Well, it's... it's just a step out of several steps that have to be taken.
Is it an idea whose time really has come?
It's an idea that is long overdue when you look at the security situation in the country. And I think...
Is it long overdue, or are we actually just going back to our history? Because community policing was established prior to 1962.
Yeah, but when the military came and abrogated virtually everything that has made the country work, before the incursion of the military, you realize that we have to start all over again, addressing some of these issues that have constituted our national challenges today. And as you see, the issue of community policing is inevitable, and we must go further by ensuring that our constitution provides for state policing. Because today, if you look at the category of people and the prerequisites that the police have reeled out as the basis of engaging people into the community policing system, you understand that it is not deep enough, and it may not be enough to address the challenges of security in our country today. Even though it is a step towards ensuring that at communal level, we can still secure our community. But if you look at the powers that they may possess, is it enough to tackle the security challenges, especially the challenges of terrorism and insurgency that is virtually everywhere in the country today? So that's why we must take an advantage of that window that has been opened for the states, to demand further, the establishment of state police, which I think is going to greatly, address the question of insecurity in our country.
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot to go on. I'm in two minds. Should I ask my question?
You can ask your question and then we'll go on the break and come back to the question.
Do you think, I mean, in as much as you're saying that there's an issue about whether or not community policing would be well equipped to deal with the gravity of situations, isn't there also the fear that there could be an abuse of power from community policing itself?
That has always been the argument of people who are opposed to this. But we don't really easily advance argument of places where it has been implemented and it has worked. Sure. We've seen it in several countries today.
Sure. And yes, we have.
And these are human beings.
We're taking a quick break on the morning show, but when we come back, we'll be discussing this in earnest. Time for a quick break on the morning show. Do stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. We are still joined by FEMI LAWSON and Victor OHAI. And before we went on the break, FEMI, you had asked a question.
Absolutely. I asked whether or not there is a risk there with community policing, that there could be corruption there and abuse of power, even if it isn't relatively as much as it could be. Do you think that that is a risk?
It constitutes no risk as far as I'm concerned.
No risk.
The gains will naturally be more. In every system, even the federal police, as we have it today, that is totally under the control of the federal government. Are there no abuses?
Of course.
So these are fundamental, characters that anything that has to do with human beings must exhibit. But the truth is that we must look at the advantages, we must look at where it has been practiced and it has succeeded in helping to curtail the menace of insecurity, beyond the tendency of, the people in power to abuse, and misuse, such institutions. And with the consciousness of our people, we can't always checkmate Today, Nigerians have run a lot of advocacies to checkmate the excesses of even the federal police, and it has worked in so many instances. So we would not, because of the fear of likely abuse, overlook the significance of the establishment of community policing and the state police, as we have continued to demand.
What do you have to say to certain people, to critics of community policing, that say community police like Amotekun are actually cults?
No, they're not.
I know they're not. What do you have to say to those critics?
Yeah, it is one of those petty, blackmail by people who want the order to remain, people who are opposed to, things that can, the evolutions that can actually get us out of, where we have found ourselves. A lot of people are actually benefiting from the decadence. So you should expect all sort of theories, and logic from them when there are initiatives that tend to address, our challenges. Today, you find a lot of people still finding it difficult that we need, even an anti-corruption agency. For instance, so people benefit from some of these vices, and they can always come up with, arguments to justify why, we don't need it. A lot of people threatening to go to court, a lot of people threatening to protest over Amotekun. But the truth is that this is needed, and the majority of our people have adopted it.
And like we established earlier, I mean, it's an idea whose time has come, in spite of the fact that this was a policy that was originally in place in Nigeria. But let's even look at, one of the reasons that the IG put out there as the reason for, setting up or approving community policing, which has to do with developing the capacity of the various communities to actually provide security as it affects, their own peculiar needs. How important is that, for each community, like the Amotekun, the Obunigwe, in the southeast, and,
OPC,
the different OPC, and all of that, those, to develop their own security apparatus in a way that meets their own needs?
In time and space, this was something that was bound to happen. What I find interesting about Amotekun is. I'll answer to the question of the IG, but I just want to say this, that Amotekun, if you ask me, is the Southwest body language to the security situation in the country. It's because of the predominance of APC in the Southwest. The governors usually would support the federal government, and everyone was pretending that all was well, but it became apparent with all the killings and the insecurity and the fact that a lot of people couldn't travel home, you know, that all is no longer, you know...
as well as we've painted.
Exactly. And so, for me, even if they couldn't say it for party reasons, the body language has manifested in Amotekun. It's like saying this is a vote of no confidence in the federal police. Pure and simple.
And there are 59 blind spots in the southwestern region, 59 zones where people die on a constant basis.
And what this has done is, you know, this is like demand and supply. Someone talked about a gap, filling a gap. And so a gap has been created, a security gap. Not just that, but you know what has happened has helped to, how do I put it now, begin to, the things that the federal government was not listening to before. You know, when you talk about regionalization and some of the other things we were talking about, now the incompetence, permit me to use this language, and I'm saying it again.
Say it as it is.
Yes. The incompetence at the federal level is creating gaps right now, which is good. That's a good thing that is happening with this present administration. Gaps are coming up now, because without those gaps, there's nothing to fill. The gap of security is being filled right now. You could never have spoken about community policing 2-3 years ago.
Yes.
But now, because of the gap and the incompetence, they have no choice, which is where the issue of the IG comes in. Now he's asking for help because he's helpless. You know? Now, that is on the one hand.
Yes.
No, I'm just
Okay.
using that as an example.
Yes.
I don't want to extend other parts because we're concentrating on security.
On security, yes.
So, but I just want to say that, so right now that has come to stay. So many more things will arise because of gaps that will also arise. Okay, so now for the community policing, it has become clear that people must now, instead of taking the law into their hands, the states will now take charge. On the issue of whether abuse or no abuse, there's no doubt that there could be abuse. If we look at the precedents in this country, what happened to Agba Jalingo, for instance, you know, was like an abuse of the process as well.
Yeah.
Although that's a state governor from a different party altogether, but he used the federal apparatus. Imagine if he had the powers locally. But what I think we should be looking at and talking about is, if the federal government does not take charge now, in conjunction with the states, agree properly and put proper structures in place, there will be confusion. Look at what's happening in America, for instance. You must define what is a federal offense and what is a state offense.
Absolutely.
So you know when the FBI will come in, you know when the local or the county police will, can take charge of, or the state police can take charge of a case. There are certain cases that are beyond them. So the FBI will just come in immediately and take charge. So unless there is a proper articulation and, you know, how do I put it now?
What constitutes jurisdiction?
Yes. Once you begin to see random things coming up now, the South does its own, the Southwest, the Northeast, the Northwest, we're going to have confusion at the end of the day, because you will soon find clashes between federal and state, because because there's no clearly defined line between what constitutes a federal offense and a state offense,
and even a local,
and the local offense. And at what point should, let me use Amotekun now as if you like a metaphor, it has come to stay, but I just want to use that for state policing, you know, or community policing. So Amotekun takes charge. They arrest people. What happens? We have your NSSDC or whatever, which is already doing that anyway. But in any case, they arrest or they confront people. What happens afterwards? Are they allowed to use guns? To what extent are they allowed to use guns? You know, and you know all of that. So all of that has to be clearly defined.
Well, they've stated that they're not allowed to carry arms.
Right now.
Yes.
But they're applying for license. You know, so that's why we need to set an agenda right now for them to begin to consider and look at, okay, what's the way forward? How do we go about it? So if there's no proper discussion on it right now, I see confusion in the future, and I see abuse as well.
More confused than we already are?
Yes.
Do you agree with that?
I agree with him, and that is why I always restate that we must go back to our constitution. Some of these issues must be properly, stated in the constitution. The constitution must, of course, be subject to amendment for as much as possible time that it is required, because if you look at the issue of state police is a constitutional matter. It goes beyond the aspiration of any state governor, or local community. So if we go into our constitution and do the necessary amendment and, accommodate these, aspirations in our constitution, I don't think there'll be any problem, because the boundaries would have been clearly spelled out in the constitution. The state will know its limits. What happens in America are not on the basis of, opinion or how they so wish. They are all stated in the Constitution of the United States. So each constituent authority knows its bound. So I think if we, beyond these proclamations of, now we have not allowed people to have community policing, now we have allowed regions to create a Amotekun, we must ensure that we put these institutions in our constitution so that they can know their limits, so that they can operate within the limits of the mandate that the constitution will give to them. Otherwise, there will always be confusion, just like you said.
And of course, there will be volunteers, and they have to be full-time, they should be employed full-time, and all of that. And you wonder, I think one of the...
How can you be full-time?
I don't know, it seems contradictory.
Not full-time employment.
Full-time with that community policing.
They must have jobs.
They must have jobs, that's what I mean. Yes. They must be employed.
Like
but
what you call them now for the FRSC?
Special marshal.
Special marshal.
Yes, maybe
Special
something like that. Maybe something like that. Okay, still quite a number of things to look at. The basket case that the APC is becoming now. Oh my, maybe you want to address that. This issue of the chairman, Adams Oshomole, not being his people, his party members, the top echelon of the party, they just don't want him. But then again, I mean, it may not be fair to say that, because there's another group, there's a pro-Oshomole group. Is it getting his come-up-ants? I mean, some would say that exactly what happened to John Odigi Oyegun, his predecessor, is happening to him. And what was, seen to be his strengths are now becoming his weakness.
Well, I think one thing that is funny, so to put it, about the Adams Oshomole case is that as of today, you can rarely find any notable leader of the party speaking on this issue, including the president. This is quite unusual, unlike the past. And I think this is what has opened that gap wider than even Adams Oshomole himself had imagined. Because, APC, especially in some region of the country, have this tendency, to listen to opinions of their... For instance, if you talk about the APC in Southwest, it is usually believed that the opinion of the former governor of Lagos, Asiwaju Bola Tinubu, is like the opinion of the party in this region. But on this case, as of today, he has made no public comment. And you cannot begin to imagine all sorts of characters rising up from here and taking positions.
Well, Mr. Lawson, it is time for us to take another break, but we will come back to discuss that point, and I'm sure all of us are eager to hear it. Stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Now, joining us in the studio this week, we have Mr. Victor OHAI and Mr. FEMI LAWSON. We've been discussing the major stories happening in Nigeria and across the world this week, but definitely still in Nigeria at this moment. Before we went to break, Mr. LAWSON, you were talking about former governor of Lagos, Bola Tinubu, and his lack of discussion actually on this issue concerning Adams Oshomole. If you could continue that point.
That has made, like I said, the gap wider, and that is why today you find all sort of persons approaching one court or the other, for one injunction at daytime, at black market, or whichever way you want it, because the leadership, as it used to be, have not been seen to be speaking. Like, for instance, the president himself, who is the leader of the national leader of the party, has not made any categorical statement on the dispute, to the extent that, there has been court orders suspending the national chairman of his political party. The leader of the party, who was perhaps one of the backbone of the APC, whether you like it or not, Asiwaju Bola Tinubu, have not been seen to make public statements. And I think this has widened, the controversy about if Adams Oshiomhole will survive this or not.
What do you think their silence is saying? Is it that they agree with the chaos happening, that they don't think Adams Oshiomhole should be there?
Speaks louder than words.
I think that's the implication, and I think Tuesday will say more, on that, because the next meeting of the party, by then we will know clearly the position of some of these leaders of the party who ordinarily should have given a direction onto where this crisis will end.
Victor, do you agree with those who actually say that there is a huge possibility that after or après Buhari lo deluge, if I can say that, again, as it once Buhari is, out of the scene, if he steps down in 2023, the chances are that the APC may disintegrate?
As things stand this minute, I do not disagree.
You don't disagree?
I don't disagree.
So he agrees.
So you agree?
Yes. There's no cohesion. It's like the only thing that is binding the party right now is Buhari, quite frankly. And that's because of his perceived guaranteed 12 million votes. Take that away, there's nothing else. There's nothing else, quite frankly. And I'm not sure he's in a position, people are ready to say if he says vote for this one, that people will go whether blindly and just do that. I doubt that that is going to happen. And I'm sure that many of the politicians in the party are also aware and they are rethinking, As for Jagaban's silence, it's very pregnant. He was silent during Amotekun, and that earned him a lot of flicks. I think right now it's like, he's
he
not
did
quite
finally
sure.
say something about Amotekun.
He was compelled to. He didn't have a choice.
And it was almost still quite on the fence.
Yes.
He wasn't really taking a stance one way or the other.
That is a new sanctuary he's finding right now, silence, because it seems like whatever he says can be used against him in the court of public opinion. So, as for Oshiomhole, what has happened is, permanently use Nigerian English now. He has, okay, let me just say it in English. He has overpriced himself out of the market. It's like you're selling a good and you yes, the language I was going to say, price yourself out, you price yourself out. Let me use that language, okay? Because right now, he has this over-bloated ego. It goes with certain, I don't want to go into details, but they make up for it with their ego. Certain people make up for, with their ego.
Could you be very clear about what you're saying? Because
you can't quote me. You can't quote me.
I don't want to be clear.
Yes. So no, don't.
Is it short man syndrome? Like, what are we talking about?
He didn't say that you
Your
did.
words, not mine. So they have to constantly make up, and you need that. It's a psychological thing. It's nothing. Wow. It's nothing against anything. Sometimes because you have to keep fighting to, so people don't push you down. It's psychological. So you always have to be on the defensive or on the offensive, rather. So, and unfortunately for him, he has what could have been an asset, which is the fact that he's a very, very, he has a gift of gab. You can't take it away from him. And to make matters worse, he's from Edo State.
How does that make matters worse?
You can't put down an Edo man. It's bad enough that he's from Edo State. And then he has a gift of gab, and he also has other attributes as well. Now, he got into that place and suddenly felt like Lord of the Manor. And you forget that a table cannot stand without the legs.
And the fact that those who put you in can always take you out.
Yes. And so he got in there and suddenly became like, as chairman. I remember where his problem started. Where the problem started for him, not necessarily with the people, but in his mind, where he felt that he was even above the
governor,
leader of the party, the president.
When he said the things that President Buhari will take,
he would not. You see, at that point, yes, as a party chairman, ideally, you should be like that. But we know that that's not the reality on the ground. You are not pulling any apron strings of cash. You don't have any war chest. You don't have appointments to give to anybody. You can't even influence it. That's the truth. Under this dispensation, no, you can't.
Okay.
He can't. Well, they may respect him and say, okay, maybe from your state you have one or two people. It's not like, you know, there are some party chairmen who say, okay, yes, they're truly influential before this dispensation. But right now, the president is prima inter pares in the party. You know?
So the party chairman is not more powerful than a governor, and he could have gotten himself in trouble with his no love law situation with the Edo State governor.
No, if he could have done what he did with another state governor.
No,
but in your state, you see, that's where being an activist is different from being a politician. In your state, you try that, they can get, the governor only needs to get somebody in your ward, like has happened right now, to say you are no longer a member of the party, and you're out.
And furthermore, Identity Chauvin is far from an activist, number one. And number two, he has far less purse strings than the governor of the state.
He has what?
Far less purse strings, attachments to his coffers, than the governor of the state.
No, I know that. So, but you see, so it's easy. You need to understand where the power is. If you don't understand it, you'll be there making noise, blowing hot air. So what the governor simply did, and the governor is very cerebral, he's a strategist, he's worked in, I mean, he has been on several, he understands, he's very educated. It's simple, you don't make too much noise. Go to the local government, it's like, take away it's like, you look at a human being, just a vein, you just cut a vein and then drain life out of a man. So what he simply did was go to the local government, your ward. If you can just win the ward chairman, you have finished that chairman. You have pulled the balloon, the bubble. It's just one small prick, and that's it. And that's what has happened. Because right now he can't call himself chairman anymore because he's not a member of the party. You have to be a member of the party.
A membership starts from the ward.
Well, let's move on to other bubbles that have burst recently, and let's start with the Senate bills. So the Senate bill is stripping the president, vice presidents, governors, and deputy governors of immunity. What's your take on that?
No, because I tried to read that up. That is what people are wishing, but there's no bill to that extent right now. What is in the works right now is the bill, which has passed first reading. I don't know if it's passed second reading yet. That of the Senate leadership, the House of Reps leadership. Because otherwise, there's also a contradiction. On the one hand, you cannot be asking for immunity for the leadership of the National Assembly and be asking to strip the executive of this. But it's also on record that as far back as 2015, there was already a bill that had been passed but not signed.
Signed, yes.
You know, to give immunity to the leadership of the National Assembly. But they were bedeviled by a lot of controversies and court cases and all of that. So they couldn't do it. So, but the thing now is that Nigerians looking at the impunity with which the executive is conducting itself at all levels is now asking that they be stripped of immunity. You know, so and so that's the situation.
And if they are stripped of immunity, where do they go from there?
Appropriate or not is another matter which we could talk about here, and which is that I think, you know, the reason. Let's look at the reason for immunity in the first place.
Yes.
The reason for immunity is and it didn't just start here, we copied from the United States, and so the reason for that is simply because you want the executive to concentrate, not to be bedeviled by cases. You want them to concentrate on governance. The immunity ends as soon as they leave office, and it's only for criminal matters, not for civil matters. It can be taken to court for civil matters, okay? But for, you know, criminal matters, you cannot come and accuse him of stealing and you expect to begin to appear in court every day. Now, you may say the executive have abused powers, but just know that because there's a terminal date, you know, for every executive, at most 8 years, I would say gather your facts, wait, at the end of the 4-year period or 8 years,
maximum.
Then go after them. They won't, if they go into the Senate, there's no immunity. Unless they become, if this other bill passes through for immunity for the leadership of the National Assembly. Why I do not mind that is, I think it will give greater independence to the National Assembly if there's immunity for the leadership. because then they will not be a rubber stamp. It means the executive cannot coerce, intimidate, or harass the National Assembly.
Femi, you want to say weigh in on that?
Ultimately, just like
Yeah.
it is the aspiration of majority of Nigerians, but the truth is that it's a constitutional issue, and with the caliber of people in governance today at the various state level, whatever amendment is made into the Constitution by the National Assembly have to go through the state houses of assembly and get two-thirds, endorsement for such amendment to become part of the Constitution. And with the caliber of people who are in governance today across the state, you can be rest assured that it is as good as a bill that is dead on arrival. Right. These people enjoy immunity, and the culture of impunity keeps increasing. And I don't think I think we should concentrate more on things that will ensure that we restructure this system properly. A lot of these things will naturally be taken care of.
That's one thing that I've noticed with Femi. Your answers are always about the Constitution. Yeah. We should be looking to the Constitution for answers, but unfortunately we do not as Nigerians, as we see in all of these cases.
Because the Constitution itself is not our making. Just a few people sat over cups of tea and gave us a constitution in Nigeria. And this is written as we the people. So we need a people's constitution that will be made by the people of Nigeria. That will address a lot of this. Because there is nothing, no aspiration.
So let's talk a little bit more about the Constitution and how it's going to help us.
It won't work.
Femi, we'll talk about the Constitution deeper and how it works for the Nigerian civilians after this break. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. We are still joined by Femi LAWSON and by Victor OHAI. Thank you for your time here. Before we went on break, we were talking about Senate bills, and one bill that has sparked a lot of controversy recently and indeed over the past few months is the social media bill. Yes. Now, in its purest terms, the root of it is making sure that we abstain from the spreading of falsehoods and fake news, but a lot of criticism towards that bill has been that it's actually going to be censorship. What it is going to be an attack on freedom of speech, on the use of internet. What do you guys think about that? We can start with you, Mr. OHAI.
Okay. It's unconstitutional because it negates the issue of the freedom of expression. Okay? Now, let's look at components of the bill, for instance. Hate speech, and you say death sentence. And hate speech will be as interpreted by the government, okay? And then you have another component is that security agencies, without recourse to the National Assembly, can shut down the internet. And that any internet service provider that does not comply will be fined 10 million naira every day for every day that it's in breach. And then also you say that, if anybody, says anything that affects, I can't remember the words, but it's like if you, to sum it up, to paraphrase, if you criticize anybody in government or their action, you'll be fined 300,000 or go to jail for, is it 10 years?
10 years.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, 10 years.
I've been in jail for 30 years of my life.
Or both. This is obnoxious.
It is.
Okay? And we're talking here, so maybe what I want to say now may be like, what am I saying? But let me say it all the same. The silence of the media is, because they're the biggest victims.
Damning.
I like speaking, going to local expressions. Colleagues in the media their mouths are so full now because of the, they are calling Malu brother because of the meat that they are eating right now.
And could you just translate that parable?
You understand what I'm saying? No, I say this. No, I say this.
That's very strong.
Yes. Let me say this. You know why I am? No, let me say why I am opposed to this is the fact that, you see, what this means is almost like the death of the media, quite frankly. You can set up a newspaper without any regulations, okay? I can understand broadcast, electronic media and all of that. Now, social media is finally a common man has found his voice. But when you say that people cannot talk, this has happened in Chad, in Uganda, in a few other countries, in DR Congo, okay, where before election they will shut down the media.
Yep. Ethiopia.
You understand?
Also in China.
You shut it down, and then after you have done all that you have done,
yep.
you concoct whatever results you want to, then you now announce them. And if anybody says anything afterwards, then you can slam them with a 300,000.
It happens on a daily basis in Russia.
You understand? and if they slam you with that jail sentence and you protest, it could be interpreted as hate speech, and they kill you. You understand? I don't know why we're quiet about this. I don't know why we're tolerating this. The bill is not yet out, so no one will go to jail for it. And in any case, is it necessary? We already have laws against slander, libel, and all of that. You understand? So why would, even if, I mean, what you call it now, Shore is being held for, what is that thing?
Treason.
Treason and all that. These are laws already exist in place. Why do you need an additional law?
Do you think that this is our depreciation into a form of martial law? Containment of the people, not allowing them their freedom of speech or freedom of expression?
That's intention. You know, that's intention. The people in position in the National Assembly are using that power that has been given to them as elected representatives, some of them selected in some cases, you know, to protect their regime. They are just about, these laws are just about regime protection. It is not even about the common man. If you look at the intent of the bill, if you look at, you know, people that are liable to become the accusers, when this bill eventually becomes, which of course not going to be anyway, are people, it emphasizes more on people in public positions. What part of this bill actually talks about your right as a citizen, the right of a clergy, the right of a teacher, the right of, you know, this focuses more on people who are in public positions and are doing everything possible to protect their regime. So it's more about regime protection. It's so selfish. The law is self-centered, and you could see the reaction during the public hearing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but if I could play the devil's advocate here, it says the Digital Rights Bill, which it still falls within the same thing. It said it's supposed to be one that protected the fundamental rights of Nigerians on the internet and ensure that their safety and well-being. I mean, don't forget that Mark Zuckerberg had to appear before the U.S. House to, you know, respond to questions about the Russian interference.
And that is the direction the Nigerian Senate should have gone. You know, there should be regulations. These, you know, platforms are regulated. Some of them already have their internal mechanisms of even censoring some of these, you know, things you call hate speeches and, you know, abuses. So why not, you know, engage the providers more
as opposed to the platform,
rather than targeting the ordinary citizens?
It reminds me of a statement by Idi Amin. You have freedom of speech. It's freedom after speech I cannot guarantee. But let's move on to our last topic.
It focuses on regime protection. It's selfish. It's more or less a law that seeks to
focus on
make
their
sure that
self-interest.
nobody speaks when
Femi, let's move on to our last topic, just so that we have enough time, and that is the topic of the generator bans, because it's something that we laughed about yesterday.
We did.
You're banning the importation and selling of generators whilst using generator power to actually make this decree.
To make that.
What are your thoughts on
Unfortunately, that, you know, that bill was read, you know, very, very likely under the use of a generator in the National Assembly.
That's the point we're trying to make.
So you don't put the cart before the horse. The idea is that how much more energy, you know, our legislatures investing in ensuring that we have a sustainable, you know, power generation capacity as a country. A country that still generates less than 5,000 megawatts of electricity for a population of 200 million naira should not even look in the direction of generators.
I mean, it looks like you have naira on your mind.
It's so ridiculous, and I think it shows, you know, how I do some of these legislators.
But really, when you look at this, on a very serious note, Nigerians spend $12 billion on fueling their generators every year.
Yes.
We spend trillions of naira in importing generators and all of that. And not to talk of the environmental impact that we talked about yesterday. Is it not something that government really seriously should begin to
No,
do?
it's not out of excitement that we are spending so much. Nobody is really comfortable, powering your home with generators. Even the differences are even clear. When you power your air condition, your fan, even other, electronics with generator, and when you power with direct sources of electricity, there are differences. So it is not out of excitement that we are spending so much. It is out of the fact that the system has failed us, and that's why we have to buy so much diesel and PMS to provide power for ourselves. So the question is, how do we cut our spending? It's not by banning generator or banning the business of generator. It is by ensuring, it will get to a point. There was a time there was improvement in electricity supply in our area, and you realize that my generator was hardly put to use, once or twice in a week. It's a simple logic. Just provide power, and you will not go to TV to tell anybody not to import generator.
At the risk of cutting you off, Femi, we've got about 2 minutes left, so we want to hear your thoughts on this issue.
Yeah, well, I think we should also look closely at that bill. Quite frankly, I think that bill came as a result of the cry by Nigerians, but the problem is we don't trust the system. And look at the bill carefully. The intention is to protect the environment as well, a cleaner environment. Okay?
Should we be starting with generators for the environment?
No, let's look at it. I mean, it's also very important. But what is lacking is the fact that alongside that, if they are talked about cleaner alternative energy sources, okay, using wind from the north, I mean, deliberate policy, begin to look at it and talk about it alongside,
and invest
then
in
we will
it.
understand.
Exactly.
And is it possible to have power uninterrupted? Yes, it is. I'm a beneficiary. Where I live in Magodo, for instance, people are selling off the generators because we have an agreement with, let me not call the provider, but you know who is in charge of that area. And we pay a premium, but there's absolutely, I mean, they don't, if they take like there's a hotline, if there's a problem, immediately you
Hang
call
on a
them,
second,
resolve
Victor. How
it.
do you
So I
get
tell you,
How do you get these
it
benefits
is possible. No, it is possible. 24-hour
So it's
uninterrupted.
possible.
It is
So why are we
possible.
not getting
No,
it?
so the thing is, the ban should have been,
We need your
just
thoughts
a
in
minute.
20 seconds or less.
Yes, the ban should have been for use of of generators for people in power.
Yes.
Right.
Okay?
And public
That
institutions.
way, we can be sure that the ordinary man will have power, because if they can't get power, they'll make sure things work.
Okay, that's the perfect note to end on.